last thing here before we go to the Messianic significance. I want to show you what happened at the temple during the time of Christ and how it was different from the Egyptian Passover. First of all, this was a pilgrim feast or a travel feast. So you had Jews from all over the world coming to Jerusalem. And they estimate that there were 275,000 lambs slaughtered at Passover during the time of Christ. So there were so many, and the Sadducees, who wanted to control everything, talked about, here's Sunday, and here's Monday, when Jesus went to the temple and was overturning tables and stuff. Because they had, the head of the high priest was Annas. His son Caiaphas was the most notable guy in the Gospels, but it's because the Romans wanted to control who the high priest was. So every so often they would just say, you're no longer the high priest and you're it, or whatever. So the Jews didn't recognize who the Romans appointed. The Jews looked to Annas as he was the guy like behind the scenes who was really the high priest of the Jews. Caiaphas was his son-in-law, and he was just the out front guy. Okay, so they had what at the temple, and they were Sadducees. And so they what they had called the Bazaar of the Sons of Annas. And that's where they would control everything. They had to have temple currency. If you wanted to buy anything, a lamb or anything in the temple, which cost, they took their percentage to exchange the currency. They had lambs, and so that it was the Sadducees then who examined the lambs. Back in the Egyptian Passover, it was just the head of the household that examined the lamb from the 10th to the 14th, to see if it was without spot or blemish. But when we get to Christ's day, it was the Sadducees. They said, no, we're so holy and religious, we're going to determine. Well, the reason they wanted to determine what was that, some poor guy travels, a week with his family to get to Jerusalem for the Passover, and he brings a lamb from home, and they go, boy, I'd sure like to approve this, but I see some blemishes here, so I'm sorry, but we have some nice lambs over here for a good price. And so if the guy said, well, I'm going to go home and by the time he went and came back, Passover would be over. So, they had them. So, in the time of Christ, it was the Sadducees at the temple who were slaughtering the lambs, not the head of the household at home. And so there were so many, they divided them up into thirds. So there was 92,000 for each of those thirds. If you can imagine, when I was real young, we lived in Los Angeles, and my dad took me to and this is in the 50s. Moved there in 58, probably 1958, to a Los Angeles Rams, Chicago Bears football game at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. There was 110,000 people at the game, and that's a lot of people. but 92,000 is also a lot of people. This is the court of the Gentiles out here. You could fit 3 Roman Colosseums in the court of the Gentiles. This is the court of the women. This is the court of Israel. The most holy, this is the sanctuary, the holy place, the most holy place, the holy place. And so they would bring their lamb, each guy would bring his lamb here, right to the beautiful gate. This is where John and Peter healed the guy, the beggar. Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you. Stand up and walk. It was at the beautiful gate here, going into the court of the women, because right here at the end of the court of women, they had 12 shofars. They looked like they were collection baskets, but they looked like ram's horns, and that was for the collection, for their tithing. So that cripple knew that all those people going in here to tithe had money. So he camped out right there so that he could get some money. So this is the beautiful gate. This is the Nicanor gate, which separated the court of the women from the court of Israel. So right here in front of the holy place is the bronze altar. Now it's interesting that when you start, the bronze altar went from the tabernacle to Solomon's, the first temple, Solomon's temple, to Herod's temple, the second temple. And it changed in size, and logically so, because in the tabernacle, it was a 7.5 foot square, 4.5 feet high. Why? Well, they had to lug it around the desert for 40 years on poles. So it wasn't real big, but you get the Solomon's temple, it was 30 feet square, 15 feet high. And by the time you get to Herod's temple, it was 48 feet square and 15 feet high. So it was, I don't know how big this room is, but it was a big old thing. Okay, it was big. Okay, so guy brings his lamb here, and he has to cut the throat of the lamb. Priests don't do it. It's his sacrifice. He's got to cut the throat of the lamb into a bowl. And from here, the priests were lined up side by side. From here all the way up to the bronze altar and all the way back. So they take this bowl with blood in it and they're giving it to the next guy, and the guy goes up to the bronze altar, the last guy, he takes it and he throws it at the base of the bronze altar, hands the empty bowl to another guy, they bring it back to here. So it's just a shoom, 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 275,000 times. I can't imagine the stink, the flies, the blood. I don't know. Who's in charge of cleanup? Cleanup on aisle 4? You know, I don't know. It was just unbelievable. Okay? Then they had hooks on either side. And the Levites would, once the lamb's throat was cut, they would put it on a hook, skin it, gut it. And the entrails they would put on, then they would carry them up and put the guts on the bronze altar and burn it up. Now, you would think, I mean, this is a big thing, and it was obvious it was pretty hot, and it was burning it up pretty quick, so evidently they were able to stay ahead of it and not have just a big pile of guts over the bronze altar. You know, it burned up before and then they kept bringing them, and it burned up, and they kept bringing them. Skinned, gutted, and then they brought it back to the guy here. He took it home. Now, so this started at noon on the 14th. Twilight on the 15th, between the 14th and 15th, that's when Passover starts, the 15th. So they start at noon till twilight. So however many hours that was, they had to get through 275,000, approximately, lambs. So it changed. See, the Egyptian Passover, they actually cut the throat at twilight. And then they took the lamb home, cooked it, ate it for the family individual meal. By the time of Christ, it wasn't, the lamb wasn't slaughtered at twilight, it was slaughtered before twilight. So all that stuff had to be done, all those lambs had to be sacrificed from noon to before twilight. So at twilight then, all the lambs are been sacrificed, they take it home, they cook it, and then they eat it with their family there.